Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, August 22nd, 2020, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a 2020 electoral map and talking about what FiveThirtyEight considers to be tipping points. Essentially, these are the states that will give Joe Biden or Donald Trump a pathway to victory, essentially putting them over the 270 spot. Looking at the state of Wisconsin, Hillary Clinton could have won every other state that Donald Trump carried in terms of vote share past Wisconsin, meaning Wisconsin was the tipping point. It put Donald Trump over the top in 2016. Looking, if you want to see that visualized, if we look at the electoral map, characterizing Wisconsin, then Michigan, then Pennsylvania, Wisconsin was the largest margin, Michigan was the second, and then, Pennsylvania was the second, and then Michigan was the third. But say Hillary Clinton had carried Michigan or Pennsylvania, Donald Trump still would have won, which is why Wisconsin was characterized as the tipping point. But now we see some of these states being, considered as possible tipping points, and it makes sense. These are very large electoral prizes, and there are states down here that are less than 1% at a chance of being the tipping point. States such as California, despite it being 55 electoral votes, that likely isn't what's going to make or break the election, meaning Donald Trump probably, will win if he carries every other state up to California's margin of victory. So all of these states have less than a 1% chance. Some notable exceptions, New Mexico, Maine, these are all considered to be less than 1%, even though they were close in the past. And it makes sense that Nebraska second and Maine's second district as well are all considered to be not tipping points just because they're only one electoral vote. So they likely won't give that deciding electoral vote to either candidate. But looking at the states, let's go ahead and characterize them and talk about them really quickly because it is important to note. So these are all the states that have a larger than 1% chance at being the tipping point. So New Hampshire, Georgia, Virginia, Colorado, and Nevada. New Hampshire, Virginia, Colorado. I said Virginia and I clicked on Colorado. Virginia, Colorado, and Georgia. So these are the initial states. And I'm just going to characterize all of them so we can see and visualize it. Ohio, North Carolina, Arizona, Michigan. Ohio, North Carolina, Arizona, Michigan, and then Minnesota, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Florida. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Florida. So these are the states that are expected to possibly be tipping points. Florida and Pennsylvania take away roughly, let's look at the percentages here, and I can add them up quickly so I seem smart, 27% of the tipping point possibilities. So Pennsylvania and Florida, why them? Well, they're 20 electoral votes, and Pennsylvania and Florida were both close races back in 2016. And the thing is, Joe Biden likely will carry Pennsylvania larger than he carries Arizona, larger than he carries possibly some other battleground states, possibly larger than a North Carolina victory. So Pennsylvania makes sense. Joe Biden likely will also carry Florida. Florida could very well be that breaking, state that pushes Joe Biden over the top, because if Donald Trump's able to carry the same states he carried 4 years ago, the Rust Belt, and let's say somehow Biden carries Arizona and Florida, Biden still wins the election. But, let's say Arizona votes to the left of Florida, which is possible. Florida would be that tipping point state because it puts Joe Biden over the top. Or let's say, for instance, that Biden is able to carry Pennsylvania but loses Arizona. Pennsylvania could be the state that puts Joe Biden over the top if it's a smaller margin than Florida, because Florida alone does not put Joe Biden over the top on this electoral map. But let's go ahead and revert our characterizations. This is pretty much how the map looks based off FiveThirtyEight's expected vote share in November for each party. So Joe Biden, actually, looking at these tipping points, you would say he should be pretty comfortable. I mean, he's expected to carry most of them. The only 3 states on here that he's expected to lose by the FiveThirtyEight margin, which is not held today. This is assuming and accounting for uncertainty through the general election: North Carolina, Ohio, and Georgia. But they actually have a very minimal chance at being the actual tipping point. Florida and Pennsylvania, these likely will put Joe Biden over the top. Now, it's very possible that it's Michigan or Minnesota or Wisconsin, but as we start to dabble into the less than 5% margin, it sort of mixes up with the rest of these less than 1% chance at being a tipping point. Despite Georgia and Virginia having 16 and 13 electoral votes respectively, yes, they have a pretty large electoral vote count, but these will probably vote to the left or right of some other swing states that very well could end up actually being the tipping point states. So Florida and Pennsylvania actually might be one of the closer states. We probably won't see too many states voting to the left or right of Florida in terms of swing states. These will probably be at least too much to the right or left. it'll be so if Biden wins, I would say to the left, just because if Florida does put him over the top, he probably is winning Florida as his narrowest margin, and maybe another state thrown in there, but maybe North Carolina could be narrower than Florida. But it is possible. I could definitely see a map where Florida puts Joe Biden over the top, but something weird would have to happen in the Rust Belt in order for that to occur, which is why Pennsylvania seems to be that state, because again, 2016 map, if Trump had won any of the Rust Belt states, any one of the three, and Hillary Clinton carried the other two, he still would have won the election, which is why Wisconsin was that tipping point just because of the margin. But let's say, for instance, that, Biden somehow is able to carry Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan, but let's say Pennsylvania was the narrowest of them all. It puts him over the top, puts him at 278, but still would be considered to be a tipping point just because it was the closest margin, and without it, he would not have won the election. For Trump, looking at Ohio and North Carolina and Georgia, if we're talking about a possibility of Donald Trump winning the election, the tipping point state would likely also be either Pennsylvania or Florida as well. That's just because of the fact that Donald Trump likely could carry Pennsylvania or Wisconsin by roughly the same margin as 2016 if he retains his voters. That makes sense. And that would just essentially put the rest of the states after that, making them negligible, meaning Joe Biden could very well have won them, but the election outcome would have been the same as it was in 2016. Florida could also be that way. Let's say somehow Donald Trump wins Wisconsin by a larger margin than Florida. If Florida is the narrowest of them all, that is the tipping point because it puts him over 270. Because as I fill in the rest of this map, let's just go very quickly. Assume he carries Nebraska second. Oh my goodness, I don't know why I keep clicking wrong. And let's see, Indiana, West Virginia, and then Maine 2nd District. If I throw in, let me see, Utah goes there, and then Iowa, and then that puts Donald Trump at 270 electoral votes. That's assuming that Joe Biden is able to carry Michigan and Pennsylvania. But in this sense, Wisconsin could vote to the right of Florida, and let's say Florida puts him over the top because without Florida, Biden would have won, or without Wisconsin, Biden would have won. But there's so many possibilities for these tipping points, but we're starting to see why Florida and Pennsylvania, which are very large in terms of electoral vote share, are making up the tipping points. Florida is nearly 25% in terms of a chance of being the tipping point. And it actually is bad news for President Trump, because if Florida does end up going for Joe Biden, if that's the tipping point state, there very well could be states after Florida that vote for Joe Biden. Now, I think Florida will be close. I think it will be by a 1% to 2% margin, regardless of who wins it. Even though Joe Biden's up by a pretty considerable margin in Florida, might I add 6% statewide, I don't think it's going to be a 6-point margin of victory. But if Biden carries Florida, I could see him carrying North Carolina. He's going to carry the rest of these states. Actually, let's just go ahead and fill in this map based off of what I expect to happen on Election Day. Pretty much, Biden could carry Florida and also North Carolina. I do have to go ahead and take a look at North Carolina by the time I make my next prediction, but even without North Carolina, Biden still wins the election. Let's say, for instance, that Biden carries Florida, loses North Carolina, loses Wisconsin and Michigan, or at least they're narrower margins than Florida. These states, again, like I said, are pretty much negligible because Biden would have still won without them, making Florida the turning point, the tipping point state, because it was the narrowest margin in terms of, or at least that perfect margin that put Joe Biden over the top, making all the other states really not matter in the grand scheme of things. I would say the only states that didn't matter for Donald Trump following Wisconsin were Michigan and Pennsylvania, but that makes sense. So Minnesota, I'm actually surprised to see it on here. I honestly don't think that it's going to be too competitive, but it is actually mimicking what we see on the national average. So Donald Trump has roughly the same chance at the presidency than he does in Minnesota. The same cannot be said in some other swing states, actually. Minnesota is expected to vote to the right of Wisconsin for whatever reason. You can see the margins are a little bit better for Trump, but this is based off the vote share and expected vote share. So Wisconsin is expected to vote to the left of Minnesota. Pennsylvania is expected to put him over the top. Then Florida, then Nebraska second, then Arizona is expected to be the closest. But, Michigan, that's no surprise. If you look at Biden's chances there, he has an 84% chance on Election Day, but it's still having the possibility of ending up being a tipping point state. Let me go ahead and go back to that, looking at tipping points. You can see right now Pennsylvania, which is the one that puts Joe Biden over the top. Florida is just a tad bit more likely in terms of a chance. But Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, all of the Rust Belt states, Pennsylvania are all on here. I'm not surprised that New Hampshire, it's 4 electoral votes. No real shock there. Virginia's pretty solid for the Democrats, so I don't see why this would be the state that could put Joe Biden over the top unless it's somehow narrowed up closer to Election Day. Same thing in Colorado, same thing in Nevada. These are pretty much solid Democratic states at this point. Not 15-point margins, but 6, 7, 8 9%. Arizona, while being 11 electoral votes, likely will vote to the right of, possibly even Florida, depending on how things end up on election day. But we will all see in November. But Arizona probably will vote to the right of Florida. I mean, before I wouldn't have said that same exact thing, but things have started to narrow up in Arizona, not so much in the Senate race by any means, but maybe on the presidential race just a tad bit. And Georgia, it's 16 electoral votes. It's only 4 off from Pennsylvania's count, but Georgia is likely to vote to the right of the national numbers and probably won't go to Joe Biden even in a very, very good scenario for him. It'd have to be a best case scenario that Biden wins Georgia. I honestly don't think it's too winnable for the Democrats this election. So pretty much these are all the states that I characterized in the beginning of the video. You can go ahead and skip to them. Are the states that have the chance of becoming tipping points. The rest are all less than 1%. So not much hope for those states. Not much hope for North Dakota being a toss-up state, not a toss-up state, a tipping point state. But we could see things that definitely could change before Election Day, but this is pretty much the roundup in terms of tipping point states. And coincidentally, and it is directly correlated, these are swing states as well. You also have to realize that New Mexico is not included on here. Maine is not included on here. Neither Maine or Nebraska's 2nd District are included on here just because they are low in electoral count, and they probably are going to be voting a little bit more either conservative or Democratic than the rest of the country, and it won't be the deciding factor in the election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2020 election predictions. If you want to see how they've changed over time, go ahead and scroll through that. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.